I used to fish the North Sea. Now I'm haunted by what we caught. The maelstrom's fury rode the black swells of the North Sea like something cursed. The sky hung low and rotted, a bruise of cloud and spray, and the wind keened through the rigging like a thing bereft. I'd worked the decks long enough to know the sea's moods, but this was different. The water heaved and seethed, cold as a grave, and the rain came slantwise, needled and relentless, harrowing our faces raw. We dragged the nets for hours, the steel doors clawing the seabed, the boat shuddering like a dying beast as it hauled its burden. Cod and haddock thrashed in the mesh, their eyes dull coins, their gills gasping the poisoned air. The stench of them was the smell of salt and rot and the iron reek of blood gone old. Josh stood at the stern ramp, his silhouette cut sharp against the gray void. Time and the sea had worked him into something gnarled and unyielding, his face a web of fissures, his hands like tarred rope. He spat into the churn and barked my name. Aiden, get down here. The deck pitched underfoot as I clambered to him, the boards slick with gurry and rain. The winch screamed like a thing in pain, its gears grinding as the net breached the surface. It writhed there, bloated with fish and weed and darker things, the cables groaning under the weight. Josh gripped the net's edge, his knuckles bone-white, and I took my place beside him. Better be worth the goddamn fight, he muttered, though the sea stole half the words. We hauled. The net bled seawater, icy and foul, and the catch spilled onto the deck in a slithering mass. Cod twisted and slapped, their scales catching the weak light like shards of bone. But there was more. Tangles of kelp black as rot, stones crusted with barnacles that clicked like teeth. And deeper, something else. A tumorous mass, black and glabrous, swelling and contracting like a drowned lung. Ribbed with veins that burned a cold cerulean, their light leaching into the scales of dying fish, turning them spectral. The thing breathed, or seemed to. A wet rhythm that matched no living thing we knew. I stepped back, my boots slipping in the offal. Josh stood carved from salt-bleached wood, his knife hand trembling. "What the fuck is that?" I said. "Hell if I know," he said. Josh crouched but did not touch the thing, the blue light carving gullies in his weathered face. Captain Reed's boots struck the deck like gunshots. Pipe clenched between tombstone teeth. The sea had taken his left eye years back, the remaining one a shard of flint. "What's here?" he said. Josh lifted both shoulders. I stared at the thing. The captain leaned in. His shadow fell across the thing, and for a breath it pulsed brighter, veins throbbing like live wires under skin. 30 years, the captain muttered. 30 years, and I ain't never seen no god-forsaken thing like this before. Jake came laughing until he was, rag hanging limp from grease-black fingers. "That could be treasure," he said. His voice cracked like a boy's. Tom emerged squinting into the spray. "Christ and all saints," Tom whispered. Alexei followed, hands red with engine blood. He froze mid-wipe. "Kakogo churda," he said, cussing in Russian. The deck swayed. Then the thing hummed. Not sound, but vibration, a teeth-rattling drone that climbed from gut to skull. Tom backed toward the galley, eyes white-rimmed. Jake knelt near the thing, the light pooled in his pupils, twin moons in a starless sky. "Wow," Jake said. His hand floated toward the mass. Captain Reed moved faster than a man his years should. "Don't touch it," he commanded. Metal screamed. The winch shuddered, cables snapping taut. The fury listed hard, deck tilting like a coffin lid. Men scrambled. I fell against the rail, salt blood in my mouth. The mass glowed nuclear now, veins spidering across its flesh, the hum a scalpel in the brain. Jake stared slack-jawed, drool glistening. Tom's scream pierced the din as he vanished below. Alexei roared in the tongue of drowned men. Then silence. The light died. The hum stillborn, Reed stood carved from shipwrecked timber. The silence after the hum was worse. A thick, clotting quiet that pressed against the eardrums like deep water. My skull throbbed with the afterbirth of pain, a dull auger boring behind the eyes. I gripped the rail, the iron biting into my palms, and spat blood-flecked phlegm into the seethe below. Josh knelt in the gore. His face the color of a gutted cod's belly, lips peeling back from yellowed teeth as he whispered half-words to whatever god still listened. "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee." The prayer of a man who'd long since traded faith for survival. Jake hadn't moved. Still, he crouched by the mass, his spine bent like a question mark. Drool pooled beneath his chin, catching the weak light like diesel spill. His eyes were opened wide, the pupils dilated to black pits. The dead blue glow lived there still, though the mass lay dormant. As if the thing had poured part of itself into him, left its poison simmering behind those vacant mirrors. "Jake," I croaked, "get the hell back." Nothing. His hand hovered inches from the mass, fingers twitching as though plucking something invisible. Reed moved sudden, a storm front in oilskin, grabbed Jake's collar and wrenched him backward. Jake spun wild, all elbows and teeth, and drove his fist into the captain's face. Reed staggered, blood sheeting down his chin, but Jake was already lunging for the mass again. Reed hooked an ankle, sent him sprawling. Jake's temple struck the deck with a sound like a mallet splitting green wood. He lay still. A dark rose of blood bloomed beneath his skull. Then, a shudder, a rattling inhale. Jake sat up slow, head lolling on a ruined neck. Blood painted his cheek in arabesque. He stared at Reed without recognition, without malice. He seemed to stare through him. "God damn you," Reed hissed through crimson teeth. The fear in his sea-milked eye was worse than the blood, a primal understanding, the look of a wolf that smells its own mortality. Alexei materialized from the engine stink, wiping his hands on a rag gone stiff with grease. "Captain," he said, the vowels heavy with the Volga's frost. "If we throw it back, what if something worse happens? What if it answers?" Reed stared at Jake for a while, then studied the mass. It pulsed once, faint, like a heart in a butcher's bucket. "Ain't about answers," he said. "It's about what's askin'." Tom emerged from below decks, skin the gray of week-old corpse of flesh. His eyes darted animal quick, whites showing all around. He crossed himself 3 times, thumb carving shaky sigils. "It's cursed, Capt," he whispered. "Cursed, cursed, cursed." Josh swayed against the rail, one hand pressed to his gut. "It ain't cursed. It's some damned lab experiment," he slurred. "Fuckin' kelp and jellyfish is all." "Why it breathes, then?" Alexei's voice cut cold. "Why it puts its teeth in our heads?" Jake began to laugh. Not laughter exactly, a ruptured wheeze, air forced through broken bellows. He stood, movements jerky. The wound on his head wept freely. "Y'all scared?" he rasped. The grin splitting his face belonged to something that had never learned human shapes. "All you rotten meat sacks, think it'll kill you?" He turned toward the mass, arms spread crucifix-wide. "It don't want to kill you, don't you see?" His fingers grazed the surface. Jake's eyes had held that dead blue sheen since the thing touched him. Glass orbs lit from within, the pupils blown wide as a shark. But when he rose, we understood it was worse. His grin split his face like a poorly stitched wound, lips stretching until the corners cracked and bled. He moved toward Josh with the languid menace of a thing unspooled from its bones. "Jake!" My voice died in the salt air. Josh backed against the rail, hands raised in the universal plea of prey. Jake grabbed Josh's head and struck it against the railing. Josh's skull met the railing with a wet clang. Again, again, again. The metal sang its awful hit. Blood sprayed in arc patterns, black in the failing light. Josh's body sagged, limp as a gutted sail, but Jake kept swinging the ruined head like a clapper in a bell. Again, again, and again. We were statues, salt-crusted and hollow. When he turned on us, it was with the precision of slaughterhouse machinery. Alexei raised greased hands in defense, but it was too late. Jake's fist cratered the Russian's throat, cartilage collapsing like rotted mastwood. Alexei folded, drowning on his own blood, while Jake pivoted toward Tom. Tom ran. Jake moved like current, fast and depthless, snatching Tom's ankle mid-stride. Tom screamed as Jake dragged him back, fingernails scraping grooves in the rusted iron. Reed charged then, a pipe raised high, but Jake sidestepped with eel grace. The captain's weapon struck empty air. Jake's counterblow dropped the captain like a gaffed marlin. I ran. Jake's laughter chased me, a sound like rigging torn in a gale. The storage door loomed, pitted steel smeared with fish guts. I barricaded myself inside among crates of rusted hooks and frayed netting. The dark stank of brine and diesel. I heard someone groaning, not human, not animal. I peered through the salt-caked window. Josh shuffled toward me, what remained of him. His skull a shattered eggshell, brain matter glistening in the crevices, clouded eyes milky as a dead squid. The thing inside his corpse moved all wrong, joints bending backward, fingers clawing air in palsied jerks. The dead were all rising. I scavenged the crates with numb hands. A flare gun crusted with barnacles, a life jacket gone green with mold. The door hinges screamed as I shouldered into the maelstrom. Jake stood silhouetted against the roiling sky, his laughter now a ceaseless drone. The others lurched behind him, Reed dragging a shattered leg, Tom crawling on stumps of elbows, Alexei's head lolling from a spine snapped clean. Their eyes burned with that same cursed blue. I fired the flare. A comet's tail of phosphorus red lit the slaughterhouse deck. Jake turned, his grin splitting wider, and in that hellish glow I saw the truth, the thing inside him, inside all of them, pulsing like a nest of eels under their skin. The life jacket clung to me like a dead man's embrace as I vaulted the rail. The black water opened its maw. The sea stretched endless and gray, a roiling purgatory of water and sky. The maelstrom's fury lay hull down on the horizon, a blackened tooth jutting from the maw of the deep. The life jacket bit into my ribs, its buoyancy a meager blasphemy against the hunger of the waves. My legs hung numb in the jellied water, dead things trailing in the current. Salt crusted my lips, blood blooming where the skin split. Hours had passed since I'd plunged into the void. Time held no purchase here, only the living and the not. Movement flickered on the Fury's distant deck. Figures lurched along the rail, marionette-limbed and wrong. Josh, Alexis, Reed. Their bodies bent at angles no spine should allow, skin luminous with that same gangrenous blue that had rotted through our world. They paused as one, heads swiveling toward some silent command. Then they hurled themselves overboard. Bodies struck the water with fleshy detonations. They thrashed toward me in that distant horizon, limbs churning the brine to froth, glowing like drowned stars. No cries, no breaths, only that terrible purpose. The sea claimed them greedily. Reed sank last, his milky eye fixed on me even as the dark closed over his head. Night fell. The stars blinked cold and indifferent. My gut cramped, emptiness gnawing at itself. Thirst sandpapered my throat. To drink the sea was to court death, but death kept closer company now, his breath on my neck. Dawn came leprous and pale. I raised blistered hands against the light, scanning the horizon for ships, planes, gods, nothing but the gray forever. The life jacket chafed raw flesh. My legs had gone beyond pain to some mute abstraction of self. On the second day, the driftwood came. A spar from some lost vessel, barnacled and reeking of rot. I clung to it, fingers finding purchase in the worm-riddled grain. It buoyed me when the squalls came, wind screaming like the damned. I did not think of what moved beneath. The things that wore familiar faces, their bones lit from within by that eldritch blue. The third day unspooled in fevered ribbons. Sun like a white-hot brand. Nightmares swam just beneath waking, pale faces ballooning from the depths, mouths gasping soundless curses. I bit my arm to stay conscious. Sleep promised darker things, cold tendrils coiling around ankles, glowing veins threading through black water. On the fourth day, I saw a smudge on the horizon, white against gray, not ship nor raft, but something moving. My heart stuttered. I raised arms heavy as anvils, croaking a prayer through cracked lips. The sound died in the wind. The speck grew. I waved until my shoulders screamed. The ember in my chest guttered. The speck swelled in the gray waste. Not ship nor savior, a figure. I let my arms fall. It moved as no man moves, spine undulating like an eel's, limbs jerking in marionette spasms, yet cutting the waves with shark's intent. The wind brought sounds now. Not laughter, but the creak of waterlogged timbers, the suck of tide pools emptying of life. Closer. No, the word a rusted nail in my throat. No, 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 no. It halted 10 fathoms off, buoyed by the swells. Jake, or what the sea had regurgitated. His face bloated to translucence, veins mapping blue ruin beneath skin like drowned parchment. Eyes like foxfire in a ship's corpse, that same cursed radiance seeping from their sockets. His grin split the putrid flesh of his cheeks, a rictus of needle teeth too numerous, too sharp. Kelp threaded through his hair. Crabs scuttled in the ruin of his oilskin coat. Found you, the voice wet and resonant, vibrating in the mastoid bone. Why'd you run, brother? I scrabbled backward, dead limbs flailing. The driftwood slipped away, claimed by the hungering deep. Jake's laughter rose, not sound but pressure, the whine of stressed hull plates before the breach. He drifted nearer. The stench of him enveloped me, low-tide rot, petroleum, things festering in lightless trenches. His jaw unhinged, widening beyond human limits, the maw a black pit stippled with barnacle clusters. "Ain't no elsewhere," he crooned. Salt water dripped from his tongue. "But down." His hand breached the surface. Fingers fused into a single slick appendage, blackened and webbed, glistening with primal mucus. It hovered before my face. I tasted copper, bile, the sweet decay of hope. The talon traced a cold parabola an inch from my eye. "Not yet," he breathed. The words vibrated in my teeth. Soon, he sank, slowly, deliberate, eyes never leaving mine. The water embraced him, a lover's caress. The last I saw was that grin stretched eternal before the dark of the water took him. The laughter welled up from below, a subsonic thrum that stirred the water into whirlpools. I clung to the life jacket. The horizon bled into void. The sea watched with a billion glass eyes. The sea kept me long after they pulled me from its maw, days uncounted, nights without stars. The trawler emerged from the gray like a fever dream, rusted hull, bleeding orange corrosion, nets hanging slack as gallows rope. I raised arms gone to stone, mouthing pleas my throat could no longer shape. "Help me." Men moved on her decks, shadows against a bleached sky. Their shouts carried across the chop, crude music to a drowning man's ear. A lifeboat kissed the waves, oars rising and falling like the wings of some great seabird damned to skim the surface forever. The water clung to my legs as they hauled me aboard, cold fingers trailing up my calves. I did not look down, did not dare. Rough hands swaddled me in wool that reeked of another man's sweat. Their voices reached me through fathoms of static. "Easy now, lad, Christ alive, look at him, get the kettle on." I stared at the planks beneath my boots, watched seawater weep through the cracks. Some part of me still floated there, adrift between worlds. Engine vibrations thrummed in my marrow as they bore me below decks to a cabin no larger than a coffin. Diesel fumes coiled in the air, thick enough to chew. A mug appeared in my hands, stained tin, liquid black as bilge. I drank. The heat scalded a path to my gut but left the deeper cold untouched. Lucky bastard. The speaker loomed in the doorway, backlit by sickly yellow bulbs. A face carved from wind and whiskey, eyes the color of North Sea fog. "Another tide and you'd have been crab meat," I nodded. My tongue lay dead in my mouth. Questions came in shifts, men with fishhook scars and breath like rotting kelp. What ship? How many lost? Storm? Collision? I gave them corpse answers, dry facts stripped of blood and truth, told of rogue waves, raging squalls. Equipment torn loose in the frenzy. They wrote it down in water-stained logbooks, nodding sagely. Sailors' superstitions kept their tongues still. No one asked about the marks on my arms, livid grooves where the life jacket straps had bitten to bone. The city of Aberdeen, on Scotland's North Sea coast, rose from the horizon. The docks teemed with gulls and graveyard shift workers, their faces gray under sodium lights. They put me in a white room that reeked of antiseptic lies. Doctors prodded my waterlogged flesh, spoke of exposure, shock, survivor's guilt. Police came with notebooks and narrowed eyes. I fed them the same carcass story, watching their pens scratch away the truth. Reporters clustered outside like lampreys. Flashbulbs popped, "Miracle survivor." Their headlines would scream. They didn't know the real story, the thing that breathed in the hold, the crew that walked into the deep, Jake's grin splitting wider with every retelling behind my eyelids. Nights were worse. The hospital bed became a raft adrift on a black ocean. Glowing veins pulsed in the walls. Salt water dripped from ceiling tiles. Always the laughter, wet and resonant. I'd wake choking on imaginary brine, fingers clawing at phantom kelp. They discharged me with pills and pity. I took a room above a dockside tavern where the windows rattled with every freighter's horn. The walls wept condensation. The mattress sagged like a drowned thing. I bought whiskey by the case, chasing warmth that always receded. Sometimes I'd stand at the window watching trawlers come and go. Their crews laughed on the docks, voices carrying up through the salt-rotten boards. Young men, foolish men, ignorant men. I'd press palms to glass and wonder which would next feed the hungering deep. The nightmares never stopped. Jake waited in them, not as they'd found him, bloated and barnacled, but as he'd been in those last moments. The wrongness of his movement, the wet click of his joint. Soon, he'd whisper through needle teeth, and I'd wake with the taste of crude oil on my tongue. Autumn came. The sea turned the color of gunmetal. I took to walking the docks at twilight, past gutting tables crusted with fish scales, past nets hung like flayed skins. Sailors stared when I passed. They knew, not the truth, but the stench of it, that maritime sixth sense warning of cursed men. One evening, I found myself before the Fury's berth. Her replacement rode heavy in the slip, a factory trawler named Atlantic's Bounty. Crewmen hosed down decks, still glistening with viscera. I stared until my eyes burned. A mate spotted me, made the sign of the horns behind his back. I fled to my room, drank until the walls blurred. Outside, foghorns moaned their dirges. The laughter began at moonless midnight, not memory, not dream. It rose from the harbor floor, bubbling through black water, vibrating in the pipes. I pressed hands to ears. Useless. It was inside, same as the cold, same as the rot. I went to the window. The docks lay empty under sickly yellow lamps. Ripples spread across the dark water, concentric rings expanding toward my building. Toward me, something broke the surface. A fin, a hand. The laughter crested, drowning out the gulls, the ships, the feeble human sounds of the waking world. I reached for the whiskey, and the sea reached back.